Now, stay tuned to Vinyl Community Podcasts.
All right, buddies. Back in the building, back on the street corner of the Vinyl Community. This is Concert Buddy with Vinyl Community Podcasts, talking about slabbing your records. And what's slabbing? We'll get into that, but I'm joined by the guys over at Vintage Media Grading. I have to be very slow because I'm conditioned to see that V in this thing vinyl, and I just go right into it. So I got to be very deliberate. So I'm being slow on purpose. So the guys at Vintage Media Grading are joining me. I'm joined by Drew and Chad. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great.
Awesome. Well, I'm hoping to kind of elevate and talk about the services that VMG provides, but also kind of for folks who don't know about this kind of part of the vinyl community, kind of add eyes and ears to this service and we'll get into it. I mean, this is nothing new in the sake of collectibles and hobbyists and so forth. But just to kind of kick it off, can you tell me like the origin story? It doesn't have to be like a Captain America took the strength serum kind of thing, but just, because obviously grading of collectibles has been going on for a while. If you've got the PSA with trading cards, or you've got WADA and video games, or the auction sites and so forth. So what's the kind of overall origin story of VMG?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So we are the three of us that started VMG. Mike Harwood, Paul Brayman, my brother, and myself. We were friends. We grew up together in Rhode Island. And we were all collectors. We collected baseball cards, vinyl, magazines, books, you name it, where we've collected it. Some things more extreme than others. And I've personally always been really into slabbing my collectibles, especially sports cards. I love the way it made the cards all look uniform. I was collecting some like Panini cards from like the 60s and 70s, which are smaller and thin pieces of paper sometimes, but you put them in the slab and it looks just like as good of a card as, a Topps Chrome card. So I found it strangely addicting, and I had my vinyl collection, and there were no companies that were doing it, or at least no companies in a hard case. So when we were Googling it, the only one that came up was AAGS, which is Andrew's company. So he was in existence and doing it.
First to market, Andrew. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah, he was. So we're like, all right, well, there's one person that's doing it, but we didn't see anyone that did the hard cases that were ultrasonically sealed that kind of matched the magazines and comics at CGC or PSA and Beckett, those types of slabs. And that's really what we wanted for our own collection. And the other part of it is how we want to store our own collection. So we have records that we have on the shelf that we like to listen to, but we also have some that we really prize and don't want to risk damaging them. And so the way we were storing them was relatively rudimentary, between pieces of cardboard and then shoved between a plastic sleeve, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So long story, still pretty long, but we ended up going. We're like, let's do it. Let's start it. If there isn't a company that's doing the hard slabbing, let's start that process. And it took us a lot longer than we anticipated. Believe it or not, designing and manufacturing a plastic rectangle was nowhere near as simple as we thought to get it the way we wanted. It took probably about 2 years to get it right. And it was a lot more complicated than we anticipated to get it right. And we finally got it to the point where we were happy and we were satisfied. I would store my valuable Holy Grail type records in these cases. In fact, I when I get something like that, I anxiously try to convince the guys to take a break from slabbing customer stuff and throw some of our stuff in slab to protect it. And by the way, when we do that, the serial number is unique and it would say like our initials or something. So there's no confusion in the market that we're slabbing our own stuff and selling it on eBay or anything like that. So we finally launched. We got the cases right. We launched, and then Drew over time, he also started to do the hard grading, and we ended up connecting. I sent some stuff actually to Drew at the very beginning because I was so desperate to get my stuff slabbed. I sent them out, and because I wanted it done, and he did an awesome job. And we sort of stayed in touch back and forth a little bit, and then one day reached out and we looked at our values aligned. The things that were important to us, I sensed was also important to Drew, and our weaknesses Drew seemed to fill, and the weaknesses that AAGS had, we seemed to fill. So it made sense to sign up, merge and join forces and make a better company out of. We think the sum of the parts is greater than the two individual parts just added together. So here we are.
Well, so Drew, to kind of piggyback on that, thank you, Chad, for laying that out. So when Chad reaches out to you, well, were you aware VMG was out there? Because you were first to market. We want to be very clear, first to market, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then Chad's reaching out because he's, like he said, he's trying to get his own stuff done. And he reaches out to you. So what was that like when, for lack of a better word, a competitor in the marketplace is reaching out and be like, hey, man, you take care of me? What was that like?
Yeah, so I took the job, and we got his stuff done, and it wasn't bad. The VMG guys were working on their thing. I was working on my thing. What my mission really was to try to get soft grading into the marketplace, because us vinyl collectors are very hard to please, and what early on, and it still is, but it's not as bad. But early on, the big message was records are made to be listened to and not locked up. So I'm like, maybe if I start off with soft grading, it will kind of just be like the gateway drug, so to speak, to getting into slabbing. So I wasn't really too worried about it. Chad was a good customer, and we stayed in touch. But then, as Chad said, things started to get to the point that I'm like, I need to make a change. They saw something that they needed to make a change, and we started talking to each other, and everything just kind of clicked. I mean, our interests are all the same. And like Chad said, it was just like, we don't have any overlap. Like it was a perfect fit right from the get-go. And so we're really happy to be able to work together as one company. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the collecting piece, because I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's easier to work on something that you actually have a personal vested interest in, right? Financial piece and all the stuff about working out and withstanding. But you guys are record collectors first, right? What kind of, take me on your, Drew, we'll start with you. Take me on your collecting journey. When did you start collecting vinyl records? Is it, talking about gateway, I heard that word come up earlier.
Yeah.
Is it something like you were collecting sports cards first and just a progression, you collect a lot of different things, or where does that start for you?
So I started with collecting music, and my brother and I, we collected not very seriously baseball cards. Like, we were the old school, like, I'll trade you this card for that card, and that kind of thing. So we didn't get really deep into that. We don't have anything super high end, but music, I've always been into music. I was telling the guys at VMG, I remember Sunday mornings, I knew it was Sunday morning, my mom would pop on Carole King in the morning, and once I heard that vinyl spinning, I was like, this is cool. So that vinyl's always played a special role in my life. When I was a teenager, I really started my collection, and just haven't stopped since. And so as far as the reason why I collect is I'm an audiophile, which sounds like it would probably be counterproductive to be slabbing vinyl and really want to be listening to vinyl. But, I have a really nice custom-made Deckware all tube hi-fi system. I really enjoy listening to. But I have and I've always had this ethos, is to buy one to grab and one to slab, essentially.
Oh, you know what I say, Andrew? Yeah. You know what I say? We're on the same plane. one to keep and one to sleep. That's how I do it.
There you go. Yeah, see, there's more than one rhyme to
That's
that
right.
ethos.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
so I always kept one nice and sealed. If it's a numbered copy, I'd always try to find the lowest number, keep that one sealed, and then I listened to the other one, and that's really been doing good. So I have player copies, and I have my collector's copies, and I'm a musician also. So when I collect guitars, I also have my players' guitars, and I have guitars I would never go on the road with. I would never take them out. So so it's kind of the same thing with vinyl. So that's how I started my collection journey.
Makes sense. Chad, what about you? Have you been a lifelong collector, or are you one of us who collected early and then dumped it all and got all into CDs and kind of changed format? Tell us about your collecting journey.
So like I said, I've collected just about everything from watches to baseball cards to Sports Illustrated, and of course, and CDs and records. And I would say on the record side of things, Drew is definitely the audiophile of the bunch. I enjoy playing a record, but I'm not the audiophile of the group for sure. Like
Okay.
I'm not noticing nuance differences in the sound of the pressings. However, I am strangely obsessed, and I can't explain it, and there's no good reason for it, of the little nuances of what makes like one variant versus another.
Mhm.
And then I make a checklist or want list, and then just spend hours of my day trying to hunt down, those particular variants for like even we were talking about it today, and it's like, oh great, now I have to get this this Home Alone soundtrack that was apparently only released in the early '90s in South Korea. So it was
Yeah,
like,
with you.
and it was and it's pretty pricey. It's like $150, and my brother was like, well, you can get the Walmart re-release for like 20, and I'm like, no,
Not the same.
I gotta have the one released in 1990 or 91. So that's what my collecting is. It's really, I like first pressings. I like debut albums. I like finding kind of off the beaten path albums of pop culture, like popular artists that were in bands or recordings before they became popular.
Sure.
And to me, that's just, I can't explain it, but I just, I find that interesting. And now I'm glad we have a way to encase them and display them instead of, I still have a bunch of boxes where they're all just in, but some of the nicer stuff I can take out and handle and not worry about damaging it or getting ringwear or anything like that. So it's about where I'm coming from on the collecting side.
Right on. Yeah, I can appreciate it because I guilty as charged. Like I like Billy Joel, and then I heard about these bands he was in before, and I've gone down that weird rabbit hole. I picked up this weird Attila record,
Yeah,
and then
Attila the Hun.
yeah, it's really bizarre, and it's so bad. It's so bad, but it's good. You know what I mean? It's like
But when you run a organ through a Marshall stack, there's some mojo there. I mean,
well, let's talk about the timing of your business kind of coming up online, and we kind of said this earlier. There's precedent for in the collectibles space, slabbing things, sealing them, having uniform grading, etc. We'll kind of get into the minutia of how all that works. But why did you guys feel that now was the time? Was it from that collecting background? You guys really feeling like there wasn't a service for this? Or did you hear from other hobbyists or other collectors there was a need for this? Like, what was the impetus behind starting this collective group?
well, for me, for starting AGS, I felt like I needed to do it because I was actually looking for the service. I was very similar to Chad. Like, I kind of wanted to get some sort of third-party review before I was able to purchase a expensive release. And
Sure.
so I looked around, couldn't find anything. That's the reason why I started AGS. So then moved to now. We're looking at the industry with any kind of collectibles. Everyone's looking for the next cool way to collect that type of thing. And vinyl's no exception. It did not peter out like a lot of people thought it would. The resurgence hit in the early 2000s, and it's been just ramping up.
Waiting for that bubble to burst.
Yeah, it just keeps going. So we're finding that there's actually people now that are into collecting comic books and cards and games and VHS and all that stuff, and they're looking at, hey, I love music. Music's an important part of my life. The movie guys, they love the soundtracks. The video game guys, they like their soundtracks. There's all comic book movies, they like their soundtracks. So now we're getting this whole cross section, and then also with music lovers, they are looking for a new way to collect, and so we're filling that need. But first and foremost, it's because we are vinyl collectors ourselves. We love vinyl, we love the music, and we want to be able to be a part of the hobby in this way. So it's important for us.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think it was, gosh, and correct me if I got the timeline wrong, maybe a year ago I started hearing about a little list, and I think it was with COVID and the vinyl, the resurgence was upon us, but then it felt like kerosene got added to it, everyone being at home and wanting to listen and kind of investing in their experience from that perspective. But then the speculation piece came into, so there's obviously like the collectible piece, but then obviously people are collecting it to turn around and make some money on it. And I think that's probably the value of what you guys are offering, one of the values, right? Because then there's a third party who kind of takes all the guesswork out. There's uniform grading, and we'll kind of get into that. And then, like you said, like even if your guys' own pieces have that custom, kind of nomenclature in it, that that you're not kind of infiltrating the marketplace or just throwing a bunch of stuff out there. So to kind of kick that piece of it off, and full disclosure, I did keep. So when I saw you guys in Austin, I did keep the marketing tool. This is what led me to reach out to you guys, because I was walking by, I was doing my Austin thing, I was locked and loaded, and then I saw your booth, and I was like, okay, I've heard of this. And so I think Drew, were you there? I think I might have talked to you for like 2 or 3 minutes, right? Didn't even mention the podcast. I was just there as a collector, right? But then I came home and thought about it. I was like, okay, this is an interesting topic. And I think that at least in my collecting circles, it's been talked about. And I know, I know you guys talk to like Nate Boyer at the Vinyl Guide. So you guys are getting out there and kind of putting the word out there. But for my collecting circle, we were familiar with the slabbing piece. And if you're watching this, I'm going to hold up my trusty sports cards. Because if you're not familiar with slabbing, it's basically where you take whatever you're putting between those pieces of plastic, and like you're talking about before, Chad, the uniformity piece is really cool, stacking, all that kind of stuff. But it's basically putting it on ice. It's on lock, and so naturally, being something that's played and enjoyed and listened to and all that stuff, there's probably been a little bit of pushback because like anyone else, I've read the Hoffman forums. I'm sure you guys have too. It's a war. It's a battlefield out there, right? But within that, the charge is like, well, records are meant to be enjoyed. So like, how do you guys kind of tip of the spear, kind of lean into that and kind of explain your business in this space?
So first of all, I absolutely agree, right? Records, they are meant to be played. And of the millions and millions of records produced, only a small percentage of those will find their way into slab. It's just like sports cards. I think PSA's last annual report, they thought that they've graded about 10% of the total population of sports cards, and they're huge.
Right.
So even a fraction of that amount, we would be thrilled. We're not trying to disrupt the market or convince anybody that likes to play the records. Like Drew kicked off. I mean, he is an audiophile and he buys records to play them. However, there are some records that you probably don't want to play. Or, I mean, take the Butcher album, for example. Nobody's buying that for the sound quality of the album.
Right.
Or it's all of the value is in the cover and the collectability and the cool aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
Same like the Led Zeppelin one with the turquoise font, right? That's there's nuances that make one variant more collectible than the other. I mean, of course, the hot mix, the sound does matter on Led Zeppelin 2, but in that case, we also offer a audio backup in the form of an NFT. So that audio, and Drew can get into the details of the equipment. Take my word for it; it's super high end. It's so the sound is captured in a way that it's meant to sound coming out of the record player, or your own system, where it's not scrubbed, so that any pop, hiss, scratch that's unique to that record, that particular record, is also captured in the backup, so it's a true unique backup of that particular record.
Mhm.
So just like I would say, there's grading companies that grade coins and dollar bills and stamps. You're not going to use $1 million stamp to post on a letter.
Sure.
Same with, comic books are meant to be read, and those coins are meant to be spent. It's similar for all collectibles, and that's what makes things collectible, because people use them for their purpose, and now they're much more rare in high end condition. And that's where, that small percentage of the records that are, or should be, or, a good candidate to be slabbed. I mean, that's what we're looking for. And, the folks that want to play their records, I encourage them to keep playing them. And I'm not trying to convince anyone that likes to play records to entomb them in plastic. But there are the ones that, sit on the shelf and have some high dollar or collectability. You may want to think about it.
Well, and even within the hobby, in this hobby, I mean, sealed records, right? Like
Yeah.
there are people who have 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old sealed records and don't open them for exactly the reason you're talking about, Chad, is that once they open them, all bets are off. Now, if they want to listen to them again, great, go for it. But once you break that seal, it changes. It changes the value. It changes. It could be warped inside. Like the mystery, a little bit of the luster is kind of taken off. But people collect sealed records nonetheless, right? So I can appreciate that. Drew, when it comes to the same kind of question, like a little bit of the pushback from certain areas, right? Again, I use the Hoffman forums because I don't think anyone in the Hoffman forums is ever happy. But when there is some of that chatter about like, oh, records are meant to be played, like as a self-professed audiophile, we heard it here first. Like, how do you kind of reconcile the audiophile part that really enjoys the listening experience, but also knows that you enjoy collecting the rare, the butcher cover, the things that the story, like talking about that Billy Joel record, Attila, right? Like the things that the story is probably better than the music, let's be honest.
Yeah, so I enjoy provenance. I love, like you said, the story. I deeply research things. I look for, like, next to the Butcher album, Yesterday and Today, there is a release that's actually very sought after, and that is the club release. Nobody likes club releases, but that particular club release actually has the true stereo mixes for a couple of songs that all other copies have the that mixed down version of the stereo. So I like listening to that copy of Yesterday and Today, but then again, it's still Yesterday and Today. I could get all those songs on the mono box set, and I love the mono box set. So I'm going to listen to the mono box set. I'm going to listen to some of these new reissues as well, which is also controversial for the Beatles. But so that's where I am in collecting. As an audiophile, in most cases, the newer reissues are going to sound better than the original pressings. They've been, back then, old jazz, for example, back then, a lot of those early pressings do sound really good. Some of them don't. And a lot of that is because, they knew that they were pressing them for old turntables that, didn't have, or systems that they knew didn't have quite the frequency response that we do now. So now they take those original master tapes and remaster them, and they sound really good for the most part. But then again, the tapes are degrading, and so we have that issue. So I always deeply research. I do a lot of comparisons. It's not uncommon for me to own probably about 4 or 5 different variants of a single release, just so that I can audition them to hear the best sound quality. And then on top of that, I also research them for the rarity. So I'll try to find that one that I'm going to collect. I'm not going to open my vintage Led Zeppelin 2 that has the really cool early hype stickers on it and stuff, because it's
wow.
sealed. It's sealed. I mean, I'm not going to do it. I have a copy that I'll listen to though, and so that's really where I lean into it. Is like, I'm not only in it for the music, I'm also in it for the stories, the nostalgia, the collectability. All of it is fun to me. I don't want to pigeonhole myself in one element of the hobby when I could take in all elements of the hobby.
Yeah, it
Drew,
makes a lot of sense.
I think you should take that Led Zeppelin 2 and crack it open on a live stream and see if it's a hot mix or not. Get some content out there.
Build up your followers first. You don't want to waste that on a small
Yeah.
audience. Take it from me.
Let's just say I'm not ready for that yet.
We'll build to that. That's
Yeah.
So talking a little bit about the process, right? We talked a little bit about slabbing, and again, if you're listening or even watching this, if you can visualize just taking whatever it is, the baseball card, record, comic book, and it's being sealed, like permanently sealed, between two heavy duty pieces of plastic that, I wouldn't recommend throwing them and doing like the ability, crazy tests or any of that stuff, dropping from buildings, but they're tough, right? So one thing, and I think I saw this when I saw your guys' booth at Austin, is that you've adopted the uniformity of some barcoding, ways to kind of catalog. So kind of walk me through your grading process, because that's also a very hot take topic in the community, because there's obviously the gold mine standard. There's some people who, and this is just me speaking, people that add like 4 pluses, like VG plus plus plus. Some people create their own terms. So walk us through, the intake process, and then how you guys grade and what goes into your grading approach.
Sure. So right now, if you go to our website, it is being revamped, the ordering process. It's going to be a lot more simple to do, but you just go to our website, fill out the basic form, make your payment. You'll get instructions on how to package the piece. You send it into our team. We go through intake. So intake is really the time-consuming part. We go through and not only look at the condition. In our rubric, by the way, is based off of the gold mine standard, but expanded, because we realize that the gold mine standard has a lot of problems, hence the VG+++ and all this like ad-libbing that people do. I'm going to go freestyle with my grading. So we established a published rubric. So there's no mystery to it. You can go to our website, check out, what a 10 is, what a 9 is. And you
guys grade, not to cut you off, but you grade on a numeric scale. It's not like gold mine is like mint, near mint, and I'm sure that the nomenclature ties up to the numeric. Can you kind of walk us through that piece real quick?
Yeah, so sure. We go from 1 to 10. Chad, if you wanted to just kind of go through the breakdown.
Yeah, so like Drew, I think you did a good job explaining it. So we started with the gold mine rubric and essentially tried to apply numeric grades to each of those: mint, near mint, VG plus, good, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is documented and public for everyone to see, so you know exactly, why did this get a 7? I think it's a 9. Well, this is the criteria that we're measuring it to. And let me see. I don't know if you can see this. This is you probably can't see it, but when I'm grading, we have this. I have this laminated sheet here of that rubric to bounce things off, because there's always that question. So it's something, we have a poster on the wall with that, and so the rubric and that criteria is something that we take very serious, and to us, it's one of the most important things, second to probably authenticating and identifying the right variant, which is just as time consuming, if not more, than the actual grading. But the key thing is consistency. So we're never going to get unanimous agreement on the exact criteria. But what's important is that the criteria is out there, it's public, and what is we are going to interpret that criteria the same way every time. So you could be sure that a VMG 8, whether it's being sold here in the United States or it's being sold from somewhere overseas, the standard and the interpretation of what an 8 is going to be identical. So there shouldn't be any surprises, because nothing's more frustrating. I'm sure it's happened to all of us, where you've bought something and it's advertised as near mint, and you get it in the mail and there's a saw cut in it, or it's just far from near mint, and I don't know what the person was thinking.
Got run over by a tractor and it's mint. Yeah,
right. And part of that you can say, well, ask for pictures, things like that, but it was just something that was lacking in the market. And I think one of the things that we're trying to communicate is, look, you may not agree with every aspect of grading, but the important thing is that it's consistent. Sure. So, and if you think this should be an 8, then you price that accordingly, and every VMG 7 pay what you think an 8 price should be, or it's going to be consistent over time. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, that makes sense. So talk about and kind of walk back into the grading piece. So the intake, like you're talking about, Drew, comes in. First thing you guys kind of focus on is identifying the piece correctly.
Yeah. Research. So it's all research. We want to make sure that we leave no stone unturned when it comes to verifying. It is not an uncommon thing for us to be on the phone with the label to discuss the variant. We email the artists sometimes, if they're accessible. We hunt down the artists on Facebook. We do all kinds of things. They do open their doors if they find out we're a grading company and not just like a fan. So, nice. So that's been very helpful in helping us to be able to identify those things. So we keep an internal database of all of those nuances, and as our population report builds, we have that additional knowledge. So we're really proud of our research. And once it goes from the research and grading stage, we go into creating the label and slabbing it. We use a injection molded case, as you know. It goes into a ultrasonic welding machine. It has some ventilation, which is industry standard with other slabs, so that it can adapt to pressure changes and altitude, or make sure that there's no, biome growth inside or anything like that.
Right.
And then we ship it back to the client in a really nice shipping carton, and look forward to the next submission. So that's the whole process. Right now, we're at what, Chad? We're at 60-day advertised turnaround.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So 60 days is what we're committed to. And we've been better than that, but I would say expect 60 days, especially with the holidays and things like coming up. 60 days is what we're committed to as far as turnaround time, and we do everything in our power to get things returned sooner, because I know what it's like. I've submitted lots of things to a lot of different grading companies, and it's you get antsy. And I used to always refresh my PSA looking for an update. And I just did it today with actually CGC. Something just got logged. So I know the excitement. I know how people, the anticipation. So we do everything we can to turn things around as quick as we can without cutting any corners. And right now it's 60 days is like what we're advertising.
Do you guys, because I noticed this in sports cards, particularly during the COVID, because the volume was just overwhelming for PSA and the like. Do you guys have express lane services, or if somebody is really hot to try to turn it over, what kind of, like, do you have different pricing tiers, or is it, one stop, one size fits all on one right now?
Yeah. So our initial plan was to follow that model and have express services. Early on, when we first launched, we were having some supply chain difficulties, and we had a limited number of cases, and we were kind of hand to mouth on getting our cases. Since then, that's all resolved, and we have more cases than we know what to do with. Hopefully, for not much longer, but we have cases now, so that's no longer an issue. So it's really what stopped. We've had a few people reach out via email and ask for an expedited service, and we offered the same price that we did when we first launched, which we later took down when we didn't have the cases, and we were able to get those orders returned in the time that they needed.
Mm.
Right now, really, honestly, the only thing stopping us is, as Drew mentioned, is we're revamping the website. That's been one of the areas I'd say that we're focused on to really try to improve. We're still unhappy with that overall user experience.
Words out of my mouth. I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, we've it's not where we want it to be. We've spent a lot of time and resources getting it to the point that it is, but we still think it still has a lot of opportunity for improvement. So we're asking people bear with us on the website front. I was managing that. Drew graciously took that over, and I am so happy to pawn that off on him. So now that's his problem, and hopefully he's going to turn that around pretty quickly.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, so really, that's I think if you want an express service, reach out to us, email us, and we will do everything we can to work with you and accommodate whatever you need on that front. And hopefully, sooner rather than later, we'll get that option on the website, so you don't have to waste time reaching out to one of us asking for special treatment.
Makes sense. Before I get off the grading topic and into my next piece, my next question for you, do you guys, because obviously collectors are familiar with Discogs and, you know, a lot of the disruption that sometimes Discogs can have in pricing, and there's obviously eBay. There's so many different places to find records online. Do you guys foresee with this product you're bringing into the marketplace of sealed records, slabbed records, do you foresee a new or a deviant kind of grading structure that Discogs or the other grading services may adopt at some point? And have those I'm not going to jump on my Discogs soapbox, I promise you. So I don't think those conversations have happened, but maybe I'm wrong because I could see that being like the next tier. What do you guys think about that in terms of a deviation of grading for slabbed pieces?
We've already started working with Discogs.
Oh my gosh!
They
make me look terrible. Make me look
no. So they have actually one of their recent articles. And it featured us, and so our hope is that one day, hopefully soon, Discogs will have some kind of facilitator for our grading system or other slabbed grading systems, so that way we can add that to the mix. Right now, they're just asking, and we're just asking people to make sure that if they sell a slabbed record on Discogs, to put copious notes into the notes section of the ad, and but hopefully we can see some change there in the very near future.
So we beat the slabbing topic to death. I know there's other services you guys offer. Talking about the third-party authentication and grading, and it's not just slabbing, right? Like tell us more about some of the other services you offer outside of putting it in the plastic.
So one of the big things that differentiates us is our audible grading. So what a lot of people wanted, it was the whole picture. They didn't want to just know the visual grade of an album. They wanted to know if it's audibly as good quality as we are looking at it. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a record and said, hey, that record barely looks played. And then I go to play it, and I am hearing all kinds of groove wear and all kinds of stuff. So, sometimes it's just pressed poorly. Sometimes the material isn't very good. So we found audible grading to be a very essential part of the grading process. It is optional. Not everybody wants it. And we've also seen it the other way around. Sometimes we've seen records that just look rough. But they sound
like champs.
Great. Yeah, exactly. They sound great. So it's a good opportunity to actually level out, because it's a subgrade, but it does contribute to the main grade of the record. And so that works good. So we have the audible grading. As a part of that, we do audible transfers if people want to continue to listen to their album after it's been sealed. Then we also have the NFT option if there are any, cryptocurrency guys out there. They want to get into that. It's a good way to make sure that copy of that album stays with the physical piece. And
we say NFTs, is I'm speaking layman's terms, so please correct me. Just same as like a rip, like a analog to digital rip, or what does that entail?
Yeah. So the the audio backup is the same, and Drew can speak about the details of the audio backup, where it's an audio transfer. The NFT is simply the deed. It's a digital deed on the blockchain, so it's transferred into your crypto wallet, and then in that is an unlockable content, which would be a folder with like a FLAC file or a WAV file, or Drew, you can. I think we want it FLAC or a lossless audio. So it's high quality. You know, you're not going to get an MP3 or something condensed. That's even I can tell a difference in the sound. But it's the same. It's a digital backup, but it's also on the blockchain, so it can be tracked. And if it ever is transferred, they would transfer ownership of that and of that backup along with the physical record. If you sell it, you know, on eBay or wherever.
Makes sense. Well, one thing I didn't touch on, and this is my failing as the host here, is in that grading process, circling back real quick, bootlegs and counterfeiting, right? Like in terms of any kind of collectible, it's there. It's, you know, it's no sense in deep diving there in this conversation, but how do you guys approach that? And is it something where through your authentication process where you're doing that research, you reach back out and unfortunately to be the bearer of bad news and tell your customers sometimes like, hey, I know you think it's this, but it's not.
Yeah, we had a heartbreaker here recently where we actually met the guy in person, and
you broke up with him in person. I like it.
But you know, we were excited because it was a stereo butcher in the shrink, and it looked super clean. So I'm like, I want to see it in person, and because we were traveling near him anyway, and we went and met up with him, and it was fake, and we had to be the bearer of bad news. It was a gut wrencher, but yeah, we have to be careful with the bootlegs. If it's a bootleg or a counterfeit that is meant to be malicious, we don't usually touch it. If it's something that's an unofficial release but tied to a company or something like that, we will make complete notation that it is not an official release. We kind of skate down the whole like the Discogs road there, noting that it's unofficial, and if they can resell it later, they can. If they can't, they can't. But we're just grading the condition and getting it back to them.
That makes sense.
And that was something we internally went back and forth quite a bit about, and understanding that if you come from the card world, counterfeits or unofficial is basically counterfeits obvious, but unofficial, I think of like some of those Bo Jackson cards that were, when I was growing up, they weren't licensed, but they were everywhere. And but they never really had any value. PSA won't grade them. So initially we were thinking we would only grade official releases, and then the conversation evolved, and Drew made good points, and some of our other partners, where the collectability of unofficial releases is a real thing, and it's much different than than like the baseball card world, where it's not malicious counterfeiting. Oftentimes, it's the only way that the particular album or concert or something was released. And there's also some interesting rules from like loopholes in the law where certain countries can release things that are unofficial, but it's not illegal. So bottom line is, if there's a way for us to identify it as something unique and not a counterfeit, and not something that's trying to be something that was officially released, most of the time we'll grade it. If there's a situation where we just can't find information on it and it doesn't exist, like there's no company, there's no year or something like that, we'll return it. And that's happened, unfortunately. Drew, we had that recently, a Sex Pistols bootleg that just had no information on it. It actually was on Discogs, but it wasn't good enough for us to be comfortable to say. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know I couldn't even tell you the decade that it was released. I could guess the paper and stuff, but it wasn't something that we wanted to put our name on and put it in a case. So out of all the areas, that may be the grayest, and it just all boils down to how much information is out there and how much we can validate, and if we are comfortable, encapsulating it and putting it on in something with our name on the label.
That makes sense. Now I'm going to jump to conclusions, guys. So please tell me if I'm way off base here. But I'm assuming that the name Vintage Media Grading was left open, so you're not necessarily sticking. Or is it safe to say that you guys potentially down the road could take on some of these other collectibles and some of the other not to say you're trying to take market share, but maybe you are. But you know what I mean. Like, but you could have been called vinyl media grading or something like that. So I'm assuming that was deliberate. Tell me about it.
Yeah, you're spot on. So you should be one of those mediums where you just sense things and
Listen, my mom used to work for the Psychic Friend, so I'm just going to be honest with you.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed that. That was our intent. That we were thinking, not just records, but CDs, cassettes, laser discs. That is when we came up with the name and the idea, that was something that we always wanted to move into. What we found is, for us to call ourselves experts in records, it's going to take it's not something that we can spread ourselves so thin. There's so much information and so much, we're bringing there's the four of us, and we've all collected for a long time, and we all think we know a lot. There's so much more that we're gonna learn over time. And the most important thing, or one of the more fun things while we were doing this, is going to shows and things like that, is you meet people that know more than you in a particular genre, that we add to our Rolodex and not embarrassed to call. And we found most of the time people are pretty excited about being thought of as the expert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something we have to do. For us to sit here and say, we're the expert in everything vinyl, I think would be a very naive statement. And we know what to look for and where to ask questions. Now, where I was going with that is, you start opening that up to other collectibles, like CDs and cassettes.
Mm-hmm.
It maybe someday, but the amount of information out there, especially trying to nail down a CD when that was pressed, is we got a lot to learn before we can, and maybe hire or acquire other experts in those fields before we get into that. But for now, we're focusing on vinyl. That's what we think has the most legs as far as collectability, the things that we're most passionate about. And we are planning on moving into 7-inch and 10-inch eventually. So that's something that the next steps as far as other media would probably be other size vinyl. I know Drew is pushing laser discs because they fit in our cases and they do look really cool.
Okay, that makes sense.
But that's something maybe a little bit down the road.
Yeah, I just launched laser discs in AAGS, and then they acquired me, and then I had to take a sidestep on it, and so I'm waiting my turn.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because you guys have probably been to the shows and you're flipping through and you're like, oh, is this a soundtrack? And it's a laser disc, because they literally are 12 by 12.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm about to send you guys home. I don't want to keep you too late. One question I did have for you is, my research, because I do some research, contrary to public opinion, I do some research on it. And did I see that you guys are in my space? You're in the podcast space. Is this accurate? Or was there somebody impersonating all of you called Vintage Media Grading hyphen the podcast? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so the podcast, we just started. We just filmed episode 4 a couple nights ago, and we're working on the next one. We're getting ready to head out to Hollywood. We might actually film an episode there. So yeah, we wanted a place to be able to talk about vinyl, but under the with the idea of collecting, in the sense of, hey, variants and the stories behind the releases, and exploring real deep dives of releases that you never realized an artist put out. So that's really what we're focusing on. And they're not just advertisements; they're just a lot of music nerds talking about nerdy music stuff.
That's great. Listen, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast and got some other like-minded folks, because I felt that, like you guys said in the open, there was a personal need for something in that space, and hey, more power to you. I don't look at you guys as competition. Don't worry. I did see some of your show. I saw you did Jack White show. So exactly, nerding out on music. I'm all for it.
And honestly, we want to be like you when we grow up. So I am
officer would not like that conversation.
I am a listener of this channel, so it's actually an honor to be on here. Yeah.
What's up? All right. Well, I appreciate that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I don't think you have to worry about our podcast being any sort of competition. Most of the time we sit there saying, I can't believe there's people listening to this.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that we're better at grading records than we are doing a podcast.
That is a perfect way to put a bow on the conversation. Awesome. Well, I'm going to have some information in the show notes. You guys obviously have a website. Let me put that here for the visual folks checking this out, but it's vmgvinyl.com. Like you said, work in process with getting the site where you want it to be. But even when I was on there earlier, I mean, there's a lot of information. You guys are very transparent about a lot of the process, more information. And then you guys are also doing the smart thing. You're on Instagram. So then you're putting a little visual cues into some of your storytelling. And that's at Vintage Media Grading on Instagram. No spaces, no hyphens, nothing like that. So guys, I appreciate the time. I appreciate learning more about your business. I wish you much success, because I do think exactly what you said. It's not going to be for everybody, but for the people it is, it's great, because it does fill a need that wasn't there in the marketplace. And Drew and Chad, appreciate the time, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
And that was another trip around the turntable. Thanks for listening to Vinyl Community Podcasts.